Hello, art students. It is Mr. Crayton, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite things and one of my favorite units of the semester. So, Comics 101. So, we'll basically break down how to create and develop your character, and then eventually we'll talk about how to apply that to a comic, which is what we call sequential art. So, images that work in a sequence to tell a story. So again, this is one of my favorite things, and I'm excited to kind of break down how you guys will create your characters and the most effective way to do it. So it's going to be a chance for you to be creative and expressive, and really develop your own thing and your own story in that way. So with that being said, let's get this thing rolling. So right away. So what is your objective for this project? And your objective is to combine words and images to create an original and clear comic story. So the comic should communicate clearly and the character should be active in the story. And really, we're going to focus on, for the first part of this presentation, how your characters can communicate clearly to help your comic. So the comic strip should be a comprehensible story or joke. And this means that when someone reads the strip, they should be able to read it and follow along. And we'll break that down during the second half. But again, this first half is really just going to be about the character design and character creation. So in order for us to kind of do that, I'm going to you guys write down this first term. And this term is key for us to move forward. This term is visual rhetoric. And you may have not heard the term visual rhetoric before, but what that means is how and why visual images communicate meaning. And so in this case, the visual image will be your character. So how and why your character will communicate meaning. And we do that through the actual design of your character, so the shapes we use, but also the body language. So when your character moves, what it's communicating, but also the facial expression. So when your character moves their face, how and why it communicates. And that's really what we're going to focus on. So with that being said, let's keep this thing moving. So what is character all about? Well, before we can even talk about the comics and storytelling, we have to talk about characters because that's what this is going to be built around. So the term you'll write down is character. And character is going to be a fictional person with identifiable attributes that plays an active role in a story because you're going to make a little mini story. So again, character is a fictional person with identifiable attributes that plays an active role in a story. So when you think about that, so again, we want to be able to recognize the character. They should be recognizable in regards to how you design them. But if you look at these images below, how many of these characters do you recognize? And so you can't see their faces or like their features in that way, but you can see their designs. So you can see the actual clothing design or costume design, that character design, and that stuff stands out to you. That's what really makes this work. The colors, the shapes. So with that being said, what do you think a good character design should have? And what are qualities of a good character design? And that's really what we're going to break down today. So the things that a good character design should have, and then also the qualities that a good character should have. So character design. Character design can be summed up by this quote by Charles Schulz. And you might not know Charles Schulz, but he is one of the most famous cartoonists of all time because he created the Peanuts comic strips, so Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and the gang. And his quote is, good cartooning is basically good design. You must make your characters clear. They must look right for their personality. So again, good cartooning is basically good design. You must make your characters clear and they must look right for their personalities. So what do you think that means? Take a look at Snoopy from the 1950s all the way to the 1990s, and the 1990s version is the version that we still have currently today. But take a look at that. If you look at that design on the far left, and I like the original Peanut strip, but if you look at it, like that version of Snoopy looks a lot more basic and just more like a typical dog, less expressive. You look at the version all the way on the far right as he progressed through the decades, it's a much more expressive design compared to the original one, which looks a little bit more, again, typical, like just any dog. And so it's easier to identify and recognize the one on the right than it is on the left. So the design should represent the characteristics of your character, and that's the key. Your character design should fit like the personality and the other characteristics, physical characteristics of your character. So good character design uses shape design. And another word for that is shape language. Again, good character design uses shape language. So shapes can help communicate what your character is like. And please write down shape language, write down that term. Shape language communicates themes and ideas about the subject or defines the general nature of something. Again, shape language communicates themes and ideas about the subject meaning your character, or defines the general nature of something. So if your character, like think about like themes, ideas, if your character is a really grumpy character, then you want your shapes to kind of fit that. If your character gets, angered easily, if your character is really strong, then your shape should fit that. So that's really what it comes down to. So shapes have prescribed meanings that evoke certain emotions and feelings in us, whether we're aware of it or not. So it's kind of like colors can communicate meaning, so can shapes. So the question is, what do you want your character to communicate? And then what is your character like? Then you choose shapes that fit that idea. So you look at the shapes on the far left. So we have some square shapes, which communicate what those characters are like. So some of the square shapes are smaller, some are larger, but they still communicate. The angular shapes in the middle, so those triangular ones, also communicate. And the really round shapes, again, which differ in size, but those shapes communicate what that character is like. So if you look at the characters on the bottom, they differ from what the characters are like at the top. And the key is that the shapes you choose right from the get-go, right from the beginning, should help fit the idea of what you want your character to be like. So if you're like, hey, I want my character to be really silly and bubbly, like Jake and Finn from Adventure Time, well, those characters are very round, and that fits that type of character. So if you use really angular shapes that are triangular, that would not fit those characters because the shapes you choose communicate meaning. So there's 3 basic types of shapes. So the types of shape language. There are 3 basic types of shapes to build around: a circle, triangle, and square. And when you think about your potential character, which one fits that character best? So shape language, again, communicates what our character is like. So a circle suggests a character that is soft and funny, typically friendly, bubbly, happy as well. So you see that in a character like Mickey Mouse. You see that in the Hello Kitty character brand. So this character that's really soft and bubbly. If you look at the next set, so a triangular shapes. Triangles suggest a character that is sharp and dangerous. Can also be devious, athletic, sleek. So if you look at Jafar from Aladdin, his shapes are more angular. They are more triangular in shape. Same thing, Scar from Lion King. His shapes, if you look at the shape of his head, look at the shape of his mane, look at his legs, they are more triangular. If you look at squares, which represent characters that are more stable and strong, typically a little more bulky, you see that in Mufasa. His character shapes, so compare his head and mane to the head and mane of Scar. Like Mufasa's build is just bigger and stronger. Same thing if you look at, I can't remember the name of the character, but the older guy from Up, if you look at his build, he's built through a lot of square shapes. They're not perfectly square. Same thing with Jafar. They're not perfectly triangular. Mickey Mouse, they're not perfectly round. I mean, they're not perfect circles, but they are round in nature. they are triangular in nature, and they are square in nature. So using the basic building blocks of those to help with that character. So the idea here is that form follows function. So the shapes, the form you choose should represent the function, the type of character you want. So again, the shapes, aka your form, should represent the function, the type of character you want. So take a look at the shapes that are used in reality as well. So look at that sports car, look at that Lamborghini, and compare it to the bus. Which one seems slower? Well, of course, the really blocky and big square shape compared to the really sleek, smaller, and angular triangular shapes. The triangular shapes that appear to be sleeker and smaller seem faster. And it's the same exact thing when you compare that cheetah to the elephant. One uses more sleeker and angular and smaller and faster like shapes compared to the shapes that are stronger and appear to be slower and bulkier and bigger. And so the key is the type of shapes you use matter. Your shapes tell a story. They tell a story of what your character is like, what your character represents, what your character does. It all works together. It all matters. And so the thought you put into your initial character design is important because that helps to communicate what your character is like. And we really want to have strong characters when you develop your comic strip. So things to consider when designing your character. So these are tips from Creature Box. These really awesome character designers, Greg Baldwin and David Crayton. So use life experiences, and that's really important. So you're not just like, oh man, I don't know where to start, or I'm just pulling stuff from my imagination. Use things that you know. Draw inspiration from events and people in your lives. So typically when I design characters, I think about people that I grew up with, like friends or family, that I can help build characters around. I even think about myself. So this brings uniqueness to your design. It makes it feel authentic. It makes it feel unique to you. That's important. So use things from your own life experiences to build around. Also design believability. So regardless of how fictional the subject matter is, the character should feel like it fits your world or idea. So I'll have you guys write down at least these headlines. So use life experiences. So write that down. Just write down the bold part that's in yellow. Use your own life experiences. That's important. Pull from those. Also, again, design believability. Regardless of how fictional the subject matter is, the character should feel like it fits your world or idea. And then consider your style. Use your strengths and consider the characteristics of the style you're working in. So if you want to draw a character design that's a little more simplified in shapes, yeah. If that fits what you want to do best, go with that. If you want to draw a character design that's a lot more detailed, like something you see in anime and manga, go with that, especially if you're doing an action-based comic. If you want to create something that represents superheroes because you like that genre of storytelling, something that's, again, more action-based, then yeah, your style might appear to be less simplified. So consider that stuff. And going back to shape language, if you look at these designs have shapes that are bigger. If you look at these designs top left, they're also more angular, like triangles. So they appear to be more aggressive, more dangerous. So the shapes you use matter. The shape language matters. So how do you design your character? Well, this is what we're going to focus on today. So you are going to plan out the type of story and story idea and themes you want to portray. So you're going to plan out really the type of story you want this to be, because that's going to help you determine what your character will be like. So this helps give you a direction to go in. And then remember, everything is done with a clear purpose. Step number 2, consider the physical characteristics and the personality of your character. So that's where shape language now comes in as well. So because that's, again, going to help you eventually create the physical design of it, but consider the physical characteristics and personality. So if you look at this image top left, that's what we call mind mapping, brainstorming. So The top side, you look there, is more of the personality traits. So is your character warm and smiling? Are they more comical in nature? And then the bottom one's a physical trait. So this is a monster. This monster has things like horns, teeth, fur, claws, scales, spots, stripes, things like that, the physical parts. And there's no right or wrong. You're just really putting ideas out so you have something to work from. So the idea is you're going to map out the physical characteristics and also the personality of your character, because that will help you create the physical design. And then you use the basic shapes as building blocks. So building blocks of character. So this is where shape language comes in. So playing around with the shapes and sizes of the character is extremely important because it helps to communicate the character's characteristics and traits. And as you work through the shapes and sizes, you keep it simple. Don't worry about poses or details. You're just trying to get really the basic blocks and shapes in place. That's what you want, just the basics in the beginning. So get your large shapes in place first and then focus on the smaller shapes and details. So it's kind of like when we draw, we always work our way from outside to inside or big shapes to small. So focus on the macro meaning big, and then work your way to the micro, so the details and smaller parts. So the details of your character should fit your character as well. The details should reveal character, and if it doesn't belong in your character design. So the details you add in, the shapes you add in should all fit your character design. They should all fit, if going back to this, really the mapping you created. So your character design and detail should fit your physical character traits you came up with, but also your personality traits. And then the last thing we'll do, so we'll focus on this later, is create a character model sheet. So once you have decided on a design, you'll create a sheet that helps you consistently draw the final look and expressions of your characters, because when it comes to the comic strip, you want your character to communicate, and one way they will communicate is through the facial expressions and the body language and things you have created, because you want your character to feel expressive and not stiff. So the end game is a solid and consistent design that can communicate. So we're going to focus on the objectives of the project later, but really what we're going to focus on today for your assignment is really coming up with a map for your character. So the idea of your physical character traits and the personality, and then building a character design around that. So that's going to be our first step, and I'm excited for you guys to start your character design and really get into Comics 101.